Hello and welcome to Leviathan News. I'm Sam, your trusty host, and welcome. It is what is today?
It is Thursday.
Thursday the 13th, the day before Valentine's Day, and I'm joined here by Rob, a fellow lobster, and yeah, I've been meaning to have Rob on for a long time, but we actually have a bunch of stuff to talk about with him today concerning his InfiniFi. Is that how you say it?
Yeah, that's how you say it.
Um,
InfiniFi.
But we're going to get into that a little later on. First, I want to talk about first our sponsor, which is FX Protocol. Really interesting, great project. If you guys haven't seen it already, with their V1, they introduced the idea of non-liquidatable leverage, and in V2, you can get liquidated, which happened like a week ago, or like 10 days ago, because of some RPC issues. But other than that, it's been working great, and the fees for using it are really low versus like Aave or somewhere else, and definitely worth checking out. And also, they have some of the best yields if you want to do some stablecoin farming. I believe that they are at around like 25 to 30% right now, and then you don't have to take any leverage risk. Really, I like the non-leverage aspect of it because the fees that they're paying out, it's very sustainable. I think it's a really nice team over there at Aladdin DAO, and they're working really hard. So that's a shout out to our sponsors at FX.
I've heard good things about those guys.
Yeah. I also wanted to take a shout out to our newsletter. If you guys listening to the podcast didn't know already, we have a newsletter that goes out pretty much every day. I say it's daily. Sometimes we miss a day, but we take all the news and we provide a bit more color on it. So if you miss what is going on in the Telegram channel, because it is a lot coming through the Telegram channel. There's so much news that gets posted on a day-to-day basis, and it's hard to keep up. So you can come to the Tentacle. So I believe it's leviathannews.substack.com. We're in the process of moving it over to our own domain. We'll probably have that done in a week.
I'm assuming Dejan Spartan is a big fan.
I hope so. I hope so.
Solid naming choice.
But we're about to break the 1,000 subscriber mark. And so, yes, come and check it out. Actually, I'm going to take these. I feel a little bit red. I thought that, okay, that's a little bit better.
The filters.
Yeah, there's some red.
We're running the same microphone, by the way. Is that a Shure?
It is. Yeah, it's the Shure M7, the one that has the XLR inputs. Do you have the?
Yeah, I've got the XLR one too.
It's a nice piece of machinery. I use that, and then I use the Scarlett 2i2.
Literally running the Scarlett solo. So yeah, you're in good company.
Yeah, I've been using the Scarlett now probably like almost 10 years. So I just replaced my 2i2. I'd like the first edition 2i2, which I've used probably since 2017. And that ran until like this year when it finally started to die. And especially with having a new microphone, I don't think it was like up to snuff and pushing out enough power. So I switched it out.
Yeah. I had the Yeti forever, and then that just kicked the can. And it's like, all right, it's time to get a real microphone.
Yeah, exactly. So we're going to talk about InfiniFi like later on in the show. But Rob and I just wanted to chat about some of the news that's happened recently. And Rob, you actually brought up this thing about the e-staking that's been applied for the ETF.
Yeah, I saw that last night. I think was it Century 21? It's not with
21 shares. 21 shares.
Yeah, 21 shares. That's it. Yeah, they applied for the e-staking on their ETF, and I mean, price of ETH seemed to react well. Going back to its peg at 2650, but everyone's favorite blue stable coin is at least potentially going to have some good news in the future.
I have this strange opinion that maybe we shouldn't have staking for the ETF.
Really?
Yeah.
Why?
Well, it just means that like all the new capital that's coming in is just going to be into the stake product, which lowers the yield for everybody else. So like all the inflows into the ETH ETF at this moment have been just for vanilla ETH, which is great because everyone that is solo staking or using an LSD for using a service like Coinbase or Binance to stake with, they are getting inflated staking rates, right? If we get another millions and millions of ETH staked through the ETF, well, that just means that it's going to push the rates down for everybody.
It will, but at the same time, I think there's a really interesting aspect here that I don't think most people have considered, and that is the long term, the nation state hypothesis. Staked ETH is control. It's power over the network. And right now, all these ETFs, they're passive. They don't actually have any power over the Ethereum mainnet itself.
Right.
When staking it, you gain power. And ultimately, as you know, as nation states start to buy into these ETFs as a way of acquiring, control of that ETH and control of this network.
Yeah.
You might actually start to see a bit of an arms race toward who can have the most staked ETH and therefore prevent their enemies from taking control of, the new financial system.
Yeah, that is a good point. Yeah, I would think that if you looking at what Lido has been able to achieve, I mean, they were really inching towards that 33% mark for a while. And this was back in 2023, and we were having like all those discussions about whether we should like limit Lido at the protocol, like the protocol level, prevent them from going over that 33%. Well, what happens if it's like the United States and all of its ETFs? Could the president command the ETFs to like vote not to introduce a certain fork? Like, what happens after that?
Well, China starts buying. Russia starts buying.
Well, good problems, I guess. Yeah, for price wise, but I think when it comes to the ETFs, I would like for them to stay vanilla for as long as possible. I don't think the staking is necessary. I think that if you do want to stake, you should do it yourself in your own setups. And also the governance part that you talked about. And, as a DeFi person, I think that it's really important that we push people towards on-chain holdings rather than just being like a passive actor. Because what you're talking about with the governance is that who gets to vote for governance if there is this like ETF, right? Does every single holder of the ETF get an equal vote towards what happens with their ETH? Is it just like the controlling entity that is able to do it? Like, I think there's a lot of questions about that specifically that I would be
like that's one of
wary
the
of.
plays they're making a long-term power play, because everyone knows this is going to be the network that actually propels forward the tokenization revolution. America's had financial hegemony for 100 years, and I don't see them giving up that soft power. I feel like a lot of this in the long run becomes a soft power play, because why would you give up that control if you know that the arrow's headed in this direction? Why not try to get out ahead of it?
Yeah. Have you been following like the ETH is dying commentary? Like, how worried are you actually?
Not at all. The world's stable coins are moving around on ETH. That's where this is going, is the tokenization, the trade finance, the need to bring traditional instruments on chain. I'm not worried at all. I think the fact that ETH has that really strong decentralization at play, that massive network that we have, that makes it much more interesting to a large institution. Because if I'm a large institution, I'm terrified of governments. I'm terrified of other large institutions trying to gang up on me. And if I'm, JP Morgan Chase, I'm not going to want to be on a chain where Morgan Stanley could purchase controlling interest and then start pushing me around. Or where the US government could just nationalize the data centers where the chain is running and tell them to do something with the chain, which, for better or worse, is the case with, extremely high velocity L1s like Solana.
I think that there is something lost in the sauce of this new generation of crypto entrants, where like the discourse and narrative for probably the first 6 to 7 years was that we're underground. We're building battle-hardened systems that are cypherpunk and that need to last, and everything that we're doing is illegal. And I think the ethos kind of tied into that, right? Like the first major, I saw like a 4-panel the other day about like the 4 major onboardings for crypto, and the first was drugs through the Silk Road. The second one was like ICOs, also probably illegal as well too. Maybe not with like Trump's administration now, but like back then, very illegal. And then the third one was like DeFi summer, and then the fourth one has been like pump and everything Solana.
For better or worse, that tracks.
So now like the latest wave of entrance into the quote unquote crypto ecosystem are not doing anything illegal anymore. I mean, you had the SEC, not chairwoman, but Hester Peirce come out and say that meme coins are probably not securities violations. And if that's the case, then this new generation is not breaking the law. They're like doing very unillegal things. And so they're not having to hide underground. Unless they're like the rugging is a crime, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. It's a casino.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like while we were just building to build a truly independent financial system, with that strength that ETH has compared to, Solana's network, which is a lot more centralized.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like the outcome of that, though, is that we accidentally built something that's really appealing if you're a financial institution and don't want to have to deal with centralization.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, I've read too many of these like X is dying. Like for the longest time, it was like Bitcoin is dying articles. Like we very rarely get those anymore. I saw one the other day put out by Roger Ver's Bitcoin.com, which is a like Bitcoin Cash shill site, trying to make the case that like Bitcoin is not going to survive into the next decade. I think the argument is like false on its face and spurious. It does not make sense at this point, especially with all the L2s that are coming out for Bitcoin soon, which will like drive consistent transaction throughput. And that block space will never, I mean, it's cheap right now, but there's going to come a point where just like with the ETH block space, we never really see like low gas prices again. It just gets used up, and the economic means of and affordability of that block space just is too low. And so somebody has to take advantage of it. And we're going to get there soon.
Yeah. Every time someone says X is dying, people just fade it for a while. And then suddenly miraculously comes back to life. And it turns out the whole thing was halfway genuine disillusionment, but a lot of, manipulation.
Yeah.
Solana's a great example of that as well. I faded that so hard in September of 23. I remember I was in a bar in Austin talking with this guy at it was either Consensus or no, it wasn't Consensus. It was the other one, Permissionless.
Mm-hmm.
And he was telling me about Solana, and he was making a great case. I'm like, it's dead. It's never coming back. And I was so wrong.
What about it?
I don't like that narrative. Every time I see that narrative and buy into it, I end up screwed.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate because I think that from the beginning, like I found Solana very early. I just didn't understand the implications behind it at the time. I think that it's sometimes hard to believe in the valuations that people put a price tag on, right? Like back in 2017, when John McAfee was making his Bitcoin is going to 1 million speech. I mean, he was saying it that it was going to be in a year, or he was going to cut off his dick. I think at that time we were like, oh, okay, like Bitcoin's at like 3,000, 5,000, 10,000. This seems like really outlandish.
Yeah.
But now that Bitcoin's at 100K, like 1 million doesn't seem that far off. And
it'll happen in our lives, I think.
Rest his soul.
It definitely wasn't losing that bet that made him not kill himself.
Do you think he killed himself actually?
No, not a chance.
Do you think he's still alive?
I don't know about that one. I definitely think, either they got him or he's still alive. but he didn't kill himself. Like he knew too much. And I mean, it's the same thing with Epstein. You know, he definitely obviously managed to strangle himself in a really obscure way while the cameras were off and the guards went, oh yeah, absolutely, totally happened.
Yeah. I think I don't know. I mean, John had means and money to bribe. Like, where do you find a dead body though? I'm not sure, especially when you're incarcerated in a foreign country that's a part of Europe.
Which country was it?
It was in Spain, wasn't it? I believe.
That would be kind of hard. Like, if you told me, like, I don't know, further east, I would have an easier time believing you could, bribe somebody to produce a dead body. But Spain doesn't have that feel to me.
Yeah, that's correct, I think. But then again, I mean, we're questioning, like, did Epstein actually get murdered? Remember all those pictures of, like, they showed, like, the body on the stretcher, and they were comparing like ears.
Yes.
As they were wheeling the body out.
And it was like the autist just got to work on it. It's not him. It's not him. It's like, yeah, no, that totally tracks. Of course, it's not him.
It was such simpler times. Like, I maybe I'm a boomer and you're a boomer in this case, when it comes to crypto. And so, like, the Gen Z alpha, like, I get it, they want to make money, but as my friend Back the Bunny says, like, the market is a vote. Like, you should build for weight and not just build for like voting, right? Because if you're trading, you're just like voting with your cash to see if price goes up or down. But if you're building for weight, you're building something that can last for generations to come. And that's what you should
have an ideology that's driving it. You got to, like, have, some kind of a North Star.
Mm-hmm.
Appreciate a DeFi advisor. And, like, I mean, pump fund's fine. It's a gambling casino. But real DeFi, I mean, the ethos of trying to build something that's fundamentally more efficient, that's how we fix so many of these problems. That's kind of, like, at least my take. That's why I believed in this when I saw it. That's why I believed in Bitcoin when I saw it in 2013, is because the core root problem of politics, the core root problem of most of the issues going on this planet, are that our financial system is hopelessly corrupt and has been rigged for the past, probably 500 years. But if you can start to unwind that, you can start to fix things. It's kind of the same structure you have in the middle. This is one of my favorite analogies. You have the Middle Ages, and you've got the Catholic Church, whose power is absolute at that point in time. I'm not going to get into, Catholic Church today. Totally different animal, totally different entity. Back then, though, it is basically the Fed. It is God. It rules your life. And they have absolute power because they control knowledge. Gutenberg shows up. He invents the printing press, and that allows people to read the Bible in their own languages, understand, hey, wow, this whole thing, it's not just talking about, indulgences. Where are indulgences? So people start to question the Catholic Church's power, start saying, hey, what's going on? The Protestant Reformation kicks off, and you see suddenly this wave of, schism, all these different fragments showing up, and the power that they'd had over society for, at that point, nearly 1,000 years vanishes. It's not gone, it's diminished, but the synthesis, the thesis is the Catholic Church hegemony. The antithesis is the invention of the printing press, and the synthesis is, all these different little sub pockets of Christianity showing up and no longer having a central top-down organization. I feel like money is going through that same process right now, and that's where DeFi comes in. That's where I want to be, is sitting there as that antithesis that produces a synthesis.
Well, why would you say it's corrupt? I mean, you said that at the beginning of your...
The banking system itself is designed to extract maximum value from its participants in a perverse way, because it's incentivized to.
Well, how so?
So this is literally what we're doing with InfiniFi, actually. What banks do is you give them your cash deposits, and then you make, 0.5% if you're lucky, 1 BIP if you're working with Bank of America. What's actually happening with your money? Well, they're taking it and they're lending it out, at prime, 8.5%, probably a little lower now, but they're lending it out into, mortgages, into car notes, into business loans, into all sorts of things. And they're making a much higher rate of return than you are with that money. So then they take a gigantic spread on it. So if they're making 8.5 and they're giving you 0.5, they're taking an 8% spread. And they're just pocketing that as profit. What's worse, so that they're eating all the money that your money makes and giving very little to you. So that's one. That's where that, corruption starts to seep in. But where it really gets bad is they have an incentive to find the highest yielding products they possibly can, regardless of, and within the legal structure, they have to follow that, but they try to step around it at every possible opportunity to get higher yields. Because if they, as an individual, make a higher return for their organization, they will get a promotion. They will get a bonus. They will be rewarded for making a higher return, even if it's through something like a subprime mortgage that isn't necessarily illegal yet, but really is extremely dangerous and is putting the entire system at risk. But who cares? They're getting a promotion. They're getting a bonus. Everyone else is doing it because they're getting a promotion bonus by doing it. So now we all have to. And that perverse incentive set is what causes bank failures. That's why they keep happening, because you're incentivized to try to find a way to do something dangerous in a new and different manner than the last time. And the law is always playing catch up. And
well, so let me
create these unstable structures and lead to this system where you can't actually get out of it until you're in it.
Okay, so let me unpack a few things there, right? So first I would argue that like the banking system exists in like a very competitive environment. I think that bank margins are some of the lowest across like various industries. They're very thin, right? It's very competitive about how they give loans and about how much they can charge. Obviously, there are like variances when it comes to who you're loaning to based on risk and risk analysis. And so, when you're lending, the core crux of kind of what you're talking about is the under collateralized fractional system where banks are essentially able to get up to, I don't know, 10x or even 100x leverage on their loan to deposits across various entities. And sometimes you get duration mismatch, which puts pressure on the banking system, specifically for like the subprime mortgages. Like you bring that up. What's interesting is that like the subprime issue was more of a pricing issue, not a liquidity issue. Or sorry, it was a liquidity issue in terms of pricing, right? They all went to zero because nobody
high risk assets.
Yeah, nobody could sell them. I mean, you had all these like AAA rated bonds.
Yep. Mark to market.
They had to market to zero.
Yep. And market goes away and everything. Yeah, mark to market, in my opinion, is itself a generally.
But they changed so that
generally a bad idea to have it built into the bank itself. It would be much better to outsource it to subsidiaries while the bank focuses on the duration mismatch problem.
Yeah. So, but this is kind of like the cores that banks need to lend, and they need to be incentivized to lend. They also need to be able to like maximize shareholder returns, right? Because we do exist in a like somewhat open banking system, and so I would say that the issues really. Well, I don't know. I wouldn't say if it's corrupt. If anything, I would say the corruption exists between the state and then the banking system by allowing the banks to take undue risk on their loan books because they have an implicit guarantee from the government that no matter what happens, they're considered GSIB, right?
The problem is ultimately one of system design. I'll grant that. It's
right.
just the incentives are misaligned.
Yeah. So because you have this like interplay between state and banks, banks are there's certain banks which are no longer able to go under. They're systemically important banks, and because of that, it creates like incentives for these banks, and this is why the GSIBs especially are so highly regulated. That they have all these controls on what they can and cannot do. And I think it's fine. It's probably like in the society that we have and the shocks that we've been through in the banking system, we probably have we have a really good system. I think that the opportunities when it comes to and maybe you can expand on this, when it comes to DeFi, is really building a different set of rules that people can ascribe to. Because if you look at people who are depositing into, say, Silicon Valley Bank, I think a lot of depositors didn't sign up for the bank to be making these bad interest rate exposure decisions. I don't think they would have like agreed to it, but for some reason, SVB decided to take on like massive amounts of duration risk at essentially the bottom of yields, and they got screwed over because they didn't hedge it out. They didn't think that rates could move as they did. That's not really possible in DeFi because everything is programmatic at the moment. You look. I think DeFi suffers from like other issues where it's really a different set, and it mainly comes down to like Oracle issues or problems with risk management. We see pools which are like with Michael's CRV pool, there was probably better risk management that could have gone into it about how much they lent, and that the pricing of that risk is hard without a long term data set, and DeFi's only been around for 5 years, so it's hard to. Yeah. So in DeFi we have like really a different set of issues, but what you're talking about, like the difference between like the spread that the bank gives you versus like what they're charging on credit cards, which is a whole like different wild discussion. Like should the credit card people be able to charge 25% while only returning 3% or something, or 5% to a savings account, right?
And what happens if you eliminate some of the humans involved and can reduce the margin even further?
Right, exactly. Yeah. So if you have something like Aave where yields spike up to 25%, okay, great. Like you could come in and put at like USD or USDC or Tether on the supply side and make 20. So the trade-off is there, and the spreads don't get wildly blown out.
Exactly. And as people add more capital, the spread goes back down.
Yeah.
But what I'm really getting at is with InfiniFi, what we're doing is we're thinking about, okay, you strip away a lot of the complexities of the banking system, as really it's a bunch of modules tied together.
Mm-hmm.
You have the asset liability matching component where you're trying to reduce your duration gap as much as possible. You have the mark to market and the hedging component, which really, it's bundled in with the traditional banks right now. But realistically, that could be a subset all unto itself. And with asset managers, it often is. And it's just because of the legacy practices where, you have all these components of the system compounding on each other as they get developed and integrated. And no one actually comes at it again from a first principles perspective and says, hey, do these things actually need to be combined, that you have them integrated together at the moment? What we're doing is we're taking just one component of that system, the asset liability matching piece, and we're automating it and bringing it into DeFi, which, since we're getting rid of the human side of the equation, allows us to have much, much smaller pieces we're taking off to perform that activity, thereby actually resulting in increased rates to all depositors above what the base assets themselves are producing.
Can you talk about that and explain for viewers at home or viewers at home, what that asset liability matching issue is?
Yeah. So let's take it back to probably about 1,000 years ago, which is when we can get this simple. If you want to, lend money to, say, Bob, Bob wants to, borrow money from you for 2 weeks. And if you go to Bob and say, hey, can I have my money back a weekend? Bob's going to say, no, I'm using your money. It's being used. Sorry. Now, because, you can't get your money back immediately, you'll probably get a higher rate of return, but on your own, you might need your money back. So you start to see people pooling their money together so that you have, say Bob only wants to borrow 100. If you've got a pot full of 1,000, you can lend Bob out $100. And now Bob can take it and use it for 2 weeks. If you need your money back at week 1, you just go to the pot, take out your $100. Well, there's still money in the pot. That is the idea of what fractional reserve banking is you have a reserve that is a fraction of what you're using. That's where the term actually comes from. The leverage looping, that's the second order implication of that practice, but it's not the practice unto itself. So go ahead.
Oh, it's like lend long and borrow short, or like you're essentially banks are like borrowing short and lending long.
Yeah.
They're taking in deposits and then they're lending it out long, either like for a couple of days or a couple of weeks or years. In the case of something like SVB, they probably like have a duration risk of, I don't know, 7-10 years, because that matches like the mortgages that they're either selling or buying, or they're trying to manage by paying not too much on the short end on what they borrow, which is like customer deposits, and then they're trying to make more on the long end, and that's where this like classical banking issues of asset mismatch come in.
Yeah. They try to solve it by building ladders, where you have you have portfolios structured such that you have maturities kind of rolling in every week, every month, every day.
Mm-hmm.
You've got constant cash flow coming in, and if you can project what your depositor's outflow is going to be, you can try to balance those things as best you can from a rate side.
Right. and this is where like the perverse relationship between the state and the banks come in, is that in times of market volatility and stress, when there's lots of outflows, this is where the Fed comes in to essentially be the lender of last resort to back up any liquidity issues or solvency issues that a bank might have, in case there are these like asset duration or asset mismatch issues, and they're seeing deposits leave the bank, right? Like the Biden administration came in and essentially backstopped SVB when it collapsed.
BTFP?
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah.
What people don't realize is that's actually, everyone treats that like it's not inflation, but you're introducing cash to the economy that is not supposed to exist in the economy for 20 to 30 years in doing those loans. And no one acts like it's inflation, but it's inflation. You're implicitly socializing the bank's failure to manage duration across the entire dollar itself and devaluing your currency in that function.
And you're also pushing rates lower than what they should be, like for a longer period of time, which means that you get greater volatility when there are shocks. I think it's
exactly it's compounding.
Yeah, exactly. So the argument that some people would make is that the banks should be just allowed to go under, right? The market will figure it out, but at the same time, there's questions about like, and okay, so we have a different structure. Okay, so if you're looking at the United States as a whole, there can be zero questions about like the dollar peg, right? You can never have issues about like, are the dollars that JP Morgan has issued, are they the same dollars as Citibank or this fintech over here that has $1 billion on its book? Like, are those dollars worth the same amount of dollars that JP Morgan has? And so what the federal government has explicitly come out and said is that we are going to guarantee the peg of the US dollar in all cases, no matter what. And in order to do that, you have to socialize losses.
Yep.
It's the only way at the end of the day.
Exactly. And it weakens the dollar when one bad apple screws it up, everyone else pays.
Right. So there's an implicit put on these like banks, their loans, the dollar itself, which is explicitly guaranteed by the United States. And depending on how far away you are from the traveler, that put kind of like weakens further and further till you get to a point where you get into crypto, where that put just completely disappears. And if, say, USDC had gone under in the SVB collapse, nobody was going to be there to backstop it.
Nope.
You could have seen USDC like depeg down to 70 cents, never recover, as people like ran for the exits. Thankfully, the Biden administration came in and they were able to, they backstopped SVB over the weekend, and they allowed Circle to take out its $3 billion at the time. But, that's what happens when you don't socialize losses.
That exact system is what inspired how InfiniFi is planning to manage that potential for temporary illiquidity, also called a bank run. That was such a beautiful thing because USDC, people were worried about its peg. So what do? They sell. Smart people who believed that USDC had a guaranteed backing went in and bought it at 70 cents, held it a few days, and had an instantaneous arbitrage right there. So that's how we're managing those situations. I'll get into the automation in a bit, but what we're doing is in the event, since we're doing fractional reserve, we're taking about half of the liquid capital in our system and putting it into things like Pendle and Athena, which earn a higher rate than things like Aave, but have that 1 week to 4 week period that you have to wait to get the capital back out at a 1-to-1 peg. So and I expect this will happen, not often, but I expect that it will happen at some point with InfiniFi. If half the reserve is redeemed, and we're now no longer fully reserved, we're still fully backed, but you got to wait a week to get the backing back out since it's often Athena doing work. I expect people will just go to our curve pool and do exactly that. They'll sell for, if they need the liquidity. If they need the liquidity, they'll sell on curve and they'll get their duration needs met. I need instant liquidity. I'm okay getting 98 cents on the dollar as long as I get the money right now. So they'll get that need met. And then an arbitrageur who sees, oh, wow, I can buy something that'll be worth $1 next week for 98 cents. That's a good trade. So they come in, they buy below peg, and they help reinforce the peg with that buy operation. And this automatic buyer of last resort that we can source just through using curve, that's a much better system than this loss socialization that we have where the loss is made permanent and then passed on to everyone else who holds the dollar. Just allow the duration to naturally be played out. People can use the net present value equation. It's not hard.
Yeah, it's similar to how like Frax has set up their balance sheet, in that Frax had been under collateralized for a very long time, and the way that they were able to justify that and say that the peg should remain is that they had all this locked liquidity on top, where they said, like, even if we paid out every single dollar now, we have this liquidity which is locked up for the next year, 2 years. We know exactly how much that duration is. It's locked, and so we can plan around what our balance sheet operations will be based on that. And so this seems really similar in that you're asking people to essentially give you duration, and based on that, then you can go out and find the highest yield based on that duration.
Exactly. And Sam was literally the first person who offered to invest in this idea. So that actually tracks. I told him, and he's like, "Oh, can I have a slot?" I'm like, "Yes, of course. That's why I told you."
So explain it then. Like, what is InfiniFi? Is it a stable coin, or is it just a deposit vault? Like, what will the users see it as when they come?
So most users, it'll be a deposit receipt token. It's basically a stable coin. We don't want to convey to people that it'll always have that dollar peg, just with the grammar. It's kind of like Lido doesn't call themselves a stable coin, even though STETH is mostly worth 1 ETH. There are times it's not worth 1 ETH, but you can buy it at a discount and redeem it. So we're calling it a deposit receipt token, a DRT. And for most users, you just show up, you deposit USDC, you get IUSD out, you stake your IUSD, same way you do with FraxETH, sFraxETH, and you just start earning yield. That's most people's journey, since we want it to be very easy for your average user. However, for those users who are more active, and I love this active passive separation in crypto, it keeps showing up just all across the board. You see, you've got curators, you've got depositors, you've got Gearbox, and you've got, leverage ninjas. It's a very good paradigm. We're marrying that, and that we expect probably about 20% of users will then lock their IUSD for a period of between, we're thinking probably 1 to 6 weeks, might go as long as 13, but probably 1 to 6 weeks at launch, where they can choose a 1 week tranche, a 2 week tranche, a 3 week tranche, a 4 week tranche, so on. And what they're doing is they're saying, hey, when I ask for my money back, it'll take me 1 week to get it back, or when it'll take 2 weeks to get it back. It's kind of like a VE, but the lock only starts when you ask for the lock to start. And the longer you lock, the higher a multiplier we're going to give you, which means the higher return you're going to receive. 2 weeks will be a higher return than 1 week. 3 weeks will be a higher return than 2 weeks. But you're also in there for longer, so you have a disincentive from going too high. And through this, we gain an understanding of what users' duration preferences are. maybe 50% of people want 1 week liquidity, and then 25% want 2 week, and then another 25% want 4 week. And based on that expressed demand preference, we can automatically ladder our system. Since we know what the demand preference is amongst this sample size, we can extrapolate that sample onto the entire population. Since, again, the difference between these users isn't that one is okay with duration and one is not, it's that they're active and passive. So we extrapolate that duration preference back onto everyone. And we've got our ladder. We go out, we find assets like Athena, like Pendle, Spectra, those kinds of things. And we source duration that matches in proportionality that express demand for duration. We then allow those locked users to vote what specific milieu of assets they want across these tranches for a given week. You have to vote every week. And at that point, we perform the fractional reserve operation, where we take, if there's $100 on the liquid side deposit-wise and $100 on the locked deposit side, instead of putting $100 into Aave and $100 into Pendle, we put $150 into Pendle and $50 into Aave. Since Pendle's earning it, say 20%, while Aave is earning it 7%, the asset on the Pendle side, it produces a higher return than it would have, a higher total return, since there's more money in there, and we end up with a larger amount of total money. 150 at 20% is $30. And at 5% on 50, I think that's like $250. So you end up with $32.50 compared to if you put 100 in each, you'd end up with 25. So more money.
Right.
And then we split that across the different depositor groups so that the guys who are on the locked side, they're getting above the rate of Pendle. So instead of getting 20% in this example, they'd be getting, say, 25%. And the guys on the liquid side, instead of getting just 5%, they might be getting, say, 10 or 11.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah. No, I think that's a good way to go. I mean, I think the duration matching model works. Like we have this very special system in DeFi where there's such demand for liquidity, like unlocked liquidity at all times, that it creates really strange incentives, especially around like lending and
very much so.
Very much so around mostly around lending. Like the fact that a lending pool can dry up. I mean, it's both a benefit and a weakness, right? The fact that a lending pool can lose half its borrowable value, like utilization rates could spike to 99.99% in a block, right? If you have enough withdrawals, it's hard to design risk management around that, right? And so this essentially should smooth out the risk preferences of everyone. And then you can pass back the rewards that you're getting in a fairer manner based on duration preferences.
We're crowdsourcing what people want and using that to inform how the system works. That way it should match what they actually want.
Nice. So wait, are you launched?
No. So we announced 2 days ago. We came out of stealth, announced that Electric had backed us in New Forum, and a bunch of other fantastic investors and angels raised $3 million and closed that round back in September. And we're launching in Q2. I normally say months, but I'm not going to say months because, the code's pretty much done. We're headed off to audit in the next few weeks. It's going to be going live fairly soon.
And ETH-based launch first?
Mainnet is where the liquidity is. So yes, we'll be on mainnet. Probably move over to some other chains afterwards, but I'm very conservative when it comes to multi-chain. I don't like bridges. I don't like low-level integrations of bridge systems. They're central points of failure at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think we're getting to the point where I think we're at most networks are getting to level 1 now, and we'll get to level 2 soon.
We're coming up on the maturity of those systems. I just don't want to integrate them too quickly.
Yes. Well, great. I think people can come and find you at Robinon94, and then also the website for InfiniFi is what is it? InfiniFi.xyz.
Good memory.
Very cool. We got to wrap up because we got to hop on to some other stuff. But let me just give one more shout out to our sponsor, FX Protocol. Please go try it out. We really like it. It's got some really cool features, and you can get some nice leverage without having to pay a ton of money on it. The fees are great, and also the stablecoin options are great as well too. So you can find that link in the show notes, and we're going to be back tomorrow. I believe the FX guys are coming on Friday, and for the llama party with Garrett.
Make sure to catch that one.
Yeah. So Rob, thanks so much for being here,
Sam. It's great chat.
Yeah, we're excited to see the launch of InfiniFi in the future. We'll have to have you back on so we can see the UX and how everything works. And thanks everybody for tuning in at home.
Great chatting, y'all.